It was a quiet Saturday morning, the kind I looked forward to after a long week on patrol. Being a cop isn't exactly a low-stress job, so when I'm home, I like things calm, peaceful, predictable. That morning, I was sipping coffee on my back porch, scrolling through my phone and listening to the sound of birds chirping. My German shepherd, Titan, was lazily stretched out at my feet, occasionally lifting his head at a passing squirrel. Everything seemed normal. That is, until Titan suddenly perked up, ears standing straight, low growl rumbling from his throat. I looked up. He doesn't growl unless he senses something's off. At first, I didn't see anything, but then I caught a flash of movement through the wooden slats of my side fence. Someone was near the gate. I set my coffee down and walked toward the front yard, keeping an eye on the corner of the fence. Titan followed, now fully alert. As I turned the corner of my house, I saw her. She was dressed like she had just stepped out of a real estate office. Blouse, clipboard, sunglasses way too big for her face, and she was standing halfway up my driveway, peering into my garage windows. At first, I thought maybe she was lost, or maybe trying to sell something. But then I recognized her. Karen. That's not her real name, obviously. But she's the HOA board member that everyone in the neighborhood knows by that name. The one who left nasty notes on people's doors if their trash bins were out 10 minutes too long. The one who once measured my neighbor's grass with a ruler. That Karen. I cleared my throat. "Can I help you with something?" She jumped slightly, spun around, and gave me that fake, tight-lipped smile. "Oh, hello. I was just doing a quick neighborhood check, HOA inspection." I raised an eyebrow. "In my driveway? On my property?" She didn't flinch. "Well, yes. As part of the community regulations, the HOA reserves the right to ensure compliance, especially with outdoor storage." She gestured vaguely toward my garage. That's when I knew something was off. I'd lived in this house for 4 years. I paid my dues. I kept my yard clean. And I sure as hell never agreed to random, unannounced inspections on private property. "That's not how any of this works," I said, folding my arms. "You can't be on my property without permission. That includes my driveway. You know that." Her expression didn't change, but I could see the irritation flicker in her eyes. "You don't need to get defensive. I'm just doing my job. We've had some complaints." I narrowed my eyes. "Complaints about what?" She flipped through her clipboard. "Unregistered work vehicles, suspicious items in garages, loud dogs." I actually laughed. "So now Titan's a threat too?" She ignored that. "Listen, I'm just trying to keep the neighborhood in order. Some people don't like seeing certain things when they walk past homes." I could tell what she meant by certain things. She'd always had a problem with Titan, and probably with me too, especially after I refused to join her little HOA safety committee a while back. "You're trespassing," I said firmly. "Next time you knock on the door, or better yet, email like a normal person." That's when she got defensive. "I don't appreciate your tone," she snapped. "I'm part of the board. I have every right to be here." I pointed toward the sidewalk. "You have every right to be there, not here. You come back onto my property again without permission, and I'll treat it like I would any other trespasser." Her mouth fell open slightly, but she didn't say anything. Just spun around and stomped off down the driveway like I'd just ruined her day. Titan barked once at her retreating figure, which honestly made me grin. I figured that was the end of it. A nosy HOA rep testing boundaries. Nothing new. But deep down, something about the way she acted didn't sit right. The arrogance. The way she just assumed she had authority over my property. So, just to be safe, I checked my home security cameras later that afternoon. I've got one on the doorbell, 2 pointed at the front yard, and 1 above the garage. What I saw made my stomach twist. Karen had been snooping before I even noticed her. The footage showed her walking up to my fence gate, trying the latch, and then slowly pacing around the perimeter, like she was casing the place. She even bent down at one point to peek under the side of my deck. I stared at the footage for a good minute, trying to make sense of it. What the hell was she looking for? Then I remembered something else. Just last week, I overheard Karen complaining at the HOA meeting, which I reluctantly attended, that certain homeowners were running illegal businesses out of their garages. She was obsessed with the idea that someone was breaking HOA rules by using their house for non-residential activity. It hit me. She thinks I'm hiding something. Probably assumed the police SUV in my driveway was a decoy or some cover. I've seen this kind of delusional suspicion before. People who think they're private investigators just because they're on a board with a laminated badge. Still, I let it go. Gave her the benefit of the doubt, even though every fiber of me was telling me something worse was coming, and I was right, because that wasn't the last time I saw her near my property, not even close. 2 days later, I came home from a late shift and instantly knew something wasn't right. I pulled into my driveway around 9:30 p.m., headlights sweeping across the front of my house. Nothing seemed out of place at first. Porch light was on. Lawn looked normal. Titan was waiting at the front window like usual. But as I walked toward the front door, I noticed the side gate wasn't fully shut. Now, I always keep that gate latched. I have a routine. Come home. Let Titan out back. Check. The perimeter. Years of police work makes you a little paranoid, in a good way. So when I saw the gate slightly ajar, my heart rate ticked up. I walked over slowly, shining my flashlight along the fence line. The latch was flipped up, and there were faint shoe prints in the gravel path that runs along the side of the house. I didn't like it. I opened the gate quietly and stepped into the backyard. Titan followed, ears up. I scanned the area. Nothing looked disturbed. Patio furniture was in place. No broken windows. Still, I took a full lap around the yard, flashlight cutting through the dark corners. That's when I noticed the sensor light on the back wall had been twisted upward, away from the deck. Now I knew someone had been here. That light is motion-triggered and always aimed at the yard. Someone had to physically adjust it. Probably didn't want to be seen. I went back inside, checked the back door. It was locked. Everything seemed secure. But the idea that someone had walked through my yard while I was gone didn't sit right. The next morning, I reviewed the security footage again. This time, I caught her red-handed. There she was, Karen, walking through my gate in broad daylight. She was holding her clipboard again, like that made her presence legitimate. But this time, she was inside my fenced yard. Not just peeking through the fence, she was inside. She looked around like she was on a mission, taking notes and snapping photos of my deck, the AC unit, even Titan's doghouse. At one point, she leaned down and peeked under my grill cover like she was expecting to find something illegal. I was stunned. This wasn't just nosiness anymore. This was trespassing and harassment. I called her that afternoon. Karen, I said calmly when she answered. We need to talk about what you were doing in my yard yesterday. She sounded annoyed, like I was the one causing problems. Oh, hello. Yes, I was doing another inspection. We had multiple concerns filed, and I needed to verify a few things. Inside my fenced property? I asked. It's part of our bylaws, she said smugly. Homeowners are required to maintain HOA standards in visible and adjacent areas. That includes the backyard if there's suspicion of violations. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You broke into my property, I said flatly. That gate was latched. You opened it, walked through my yard, and started photographing things without my consent. There was a pause. I didn't break in, she snapped. I conducted a lawful inspection, and you, as a resident here, are not above the rules just because you're a, what is it again, officer? That last part had so much venom in it, I could practically hear the air quotes. I am a police officer, I confirmed, and what you did is called criminal trespass. If anyone else in this neighborhood did what you did, you'd be calling me to file charges. She went quiet. I continued. I have you on camera, Karen. You tampered with my light, opened my gate, and walked around like you owned the place. Don't think for a second that clipboard makes you above the law. Her voice was shaky when she responded. This is completely unnecessary. If you're going to overreact, I hung up. There was nothing left to say. By that evening, I had printed stills from the footage and saved all the video files to a drive. I wasn't playing around anymore. I was ready to file a formal report. I also sent a message to the HOA board requesting an emergency meeting. I didn't tell them what it was about, just that it involved serious misconduct. But before the board could even respond, Karen upped the ante. I came home the next day to find a printed notice taped to my door. An official-looking HOA violation. Form. According to her, I was in violation of several regulations. Unauthorized security lighting, unapproved dog housing structure, possible hazardous materials in storage unit, grill propane, failure to submit yard inspection clearance yard. Inspection clearance? What the hell even was that? It was absurd. Every violation was completely fabricated or based on her trespassing. I took the notice down, walked into the kitchen, sat at the table, and just shook my head. It was laughable and infuriating. Titan nudged his head against my knee, like he knew I needed a moment. That's when I made a decision. Karen wasn't just annoying. She was dangerous. Someone like her, with a little bit of power and zero boundaries, can do real damage. And I wasn't about to let her harass me, or anyone else on this street, without consequences. What I didn't know yet was that Karen was going to take it one step further. Because apparently, my warning and the footage weren't enough to scare her off. And the next time she came onto my property, she wouldn't stop at the yard. The day it happened, I was supposed to be off duty. I'd traded a night shift with a buddy of mine and figured I'd use the afternoon to run a few errands, grab groceries, and maybe take Titan to the park. I was gone for maybe 2 hours. Tops. Pulled back into my driveway around 2:15 p.m. The sun was high, my windows were cracked slightly, and everything seemed normal. Until I reached my front porch. My stomach dropped. The door was open. Not wide open, but just enough to show the deadbolt hadn't been locked and the frame was slightly ajar, like someone had pulled it shut without bothering to latch it. My first instinct? I reached for my sidearm. I wasn't carrying, but years on the force had trained my reflexes. My hand went right to my hip before I reminded myself this was supposed to be my safe space. Titan, sitting in the passenger seat, started, barking, loud, urgent, protective. I stepped out, eyes scanning the front of the house. No sign of forced entry, no shattered glass. But that door, it was open just enough to tell me something wasn't right. I walked up slowly, quietly. I kept my hand on my phone in my pocket, ready to dial 911 if things went sideways. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but something told me I wasn't walking into an empty house. I pushed the door open all the way and stepped inside, and there she was, standing in my living room. Karen, holding a phone in one hand and flipping through, one of my mail envelopes in the other. She didn't even flinch. "Oh, you're back early," she said like this was some kind of scheduled visit. For a second, I was frozen in disbelief. This wasn't just some nosy neighbor peeking over a fence. She was in my house, my private space, my home. I took one slow step forward, keeping my voice steady. "What the hell are you doing in my house?" She waved the envelope like it was a piece of trash she was cleaning up. "You left the door unlocked. I was just checking to make sure everything was secure. I noticed from the street that it wasn't fully closed." I looked at the lock. It wasn't broken. No signs of a struggle. Which meant she'd opened it. Or maybe even had a copy of the key. That thought made my blood run cold. "You entered my home without permission," I said, my voice low, controlled. "That is breaking and entering." She scoffed. "Oh, don't be dramatic. I'm doing my duty. You've been ignoring multiple HOA notices, and I had cause to investigate possible violations inside the premises." Inside the premises, I was stunned. Not only was she trespassing, she had plans. She had clearly convinced herself this wasn't illegal. In her head, she was a one-woman task force sent to police my life. "What part of the HOA charter gives you the right to go through my mail, Karen?" I asked, taking another step toward her. She crossed her arms. "We received complaints that you might be running unauthorized business activities out of this home. People coming and going at all hours, dogs barking, security cameras pointed at neighboring yards. My job is law enforcement," I said through gritted teeth. "My hours aren't 9 to 5. And Titan barks when someone like you creeps around my property." She wasn't listening, just barreled on, her voice rising. "You've made this neighborhood uncomfortable. You think being a cop puts you above the rules. You intimidate people. With your uniform, your dog, your truck parked sideways in your own driveway." That's when I reached into my back pocket and pulled out my badge. Her mouth shut instantly. "Karen," I said calmly, holding the badge out. You're in a police officer's home, without a warrant, without permission. You went through private property, entered a locked house, and rifled through confidential mail. She blinked, then said, "You left the door open?" "No." I cut her off. "I didn't. I know my house. You either forced the latch or—" I paused, eyes narrowing. "You used a key. Do you have a copy of my key?" She didn't answer. I took a slow, deliberate step toward her. "I'm calling this in." "Right. Now, you can explain to my department why you thought it was okay to break into a cop's house." She looked like she'd been slapped. Her whole face dropped. Color drained. She stammered, I didn't mean any harm. This is a misunderstanding. I was just doing my job." "Your job ends at the sidewalk," I snapped. "This is criminal. And you've been warned. Twice." She looked like she wanted to argue again, but instead turned and made a beeline for the door. I didn't stop her. I let her leave. But I followed her out, took photos of her walking down my driveway, then recorded a quick video on my phone describing what just happened, time-stamped and geotagged. I called it into dispatch too. Not as an emergency, but as a formal report. I wanted this on the record. That night, I filed a full incident report with the HOA, attached security footage, photos, and a written statement. I even added footage from my internal security cam, which showed her walking into my kitchen and opening drawers. Drawers. I was beyond livid. This wasn't just a petty turf war anymore. This was targeted harassment, plain and simple. The next morning, my phone blew up. 3 HOA board members called me personally, not to defend Karen, but to apologize profusely. Apparently, word had spread like wildfire. Someone, probably another board member, had seen my report and shared the footage. Karen hadn't told anyone she was planning to inspect my home. She had gone rogue. And now, she was in deep trouble. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over yet. Because the last thing people like her do when cornered is back down quietly. 2 days after the break-in, I got a knock on the door. It was early, around 7:45 a.m., and I was just finishing up my coffee before heading to the station. Titan was on high alert before the knock even came. He growled low, positioned by the window, tail stiff. I looked through the peephole, and guess who it was? Karen again. She was standing there like nothing had happened, clipboard in hand, lips pursed, like she was entitled to be on my property even after being caught red-handed in my house. I almost laughed. I opened the door slowly. "You've got some nerve showing up here." She ignored that and immediately launched into her routine. "I need to speak with you regarding your latest violation filings, which you submitted to the board. There are several inaccuracies, and I'd like to go over them." My eyebrows shot up. "Inaccuracies? You broke into my house, Karen. There's security footage of you walking through my kitchen like you live here." She smiled. "Yes, but as I mentioned, the door was unlocked and I was conducting an inspection related to noise complaints and visual compliance issues." I held up a finger. "Stop." She blinked. I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket and pulled out my badge. I didn't flash it like some kind of TV drama. I held it up calmly, professionally, and let it sit there between us. "This is your final warning," I said. "I am a sworn officer of the law. You entered my home without consent. You tampered with my backyard lighting. You opened my gate, went through private mail, and photographed the interior of my home." And then, she screamed, like a full-on, high-pitched, dramatic scream, as if I had just pulled a weapon on her. She stumbled back down the porch, clutching her clipboard to her chest. "You're threatening me!" she shrieked. "You can't intimidate me with a badge just because I'm doing my job." I stayed calm. Titan barked behind me, growling, pacing in the entryway. "No one's threatening you," I said evenly. "I'm reading you the consequences of your actions. You are not above the law. You've crossed every line there is." She fumbled with her phone, trying to record. Her hands were shaking. "This is abuse of power. This is harassment. I'm calling an emergency HOA session, and I'm reporting you." I nodded slowly. "You do that, and I'll be filing charges." She froze. I took a step forward, still holding the badge in plain view. Burglary, criminal trespass, mail tampering, and impersonating a government official. I hope you have a good lawyer." Her mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. She was speechless. I could tell. This was the first time anyone had stood up to her with real authority. Most people probably gave in to her tantrums and paperwork threats, but now she was up against someone who not only knew the law but enforced it. She turned and stormed off my porch without another word. And for the first time since this whole thing started, I felt a moment of relief. But that feeling didn't last long. Because, later that day, I got an official notice from the HOA board. I was being temporarily suspended from attending HOA meetings and voting on matters. Why? Pending investigation of a resident conduct complaint filed by the acting HOA president. Karen had gone nuclear. She accused me of brandishing a weapon, my badge, unleashing a dangerous animal, Titan, and intimidating her with police authority in a residential matter. It was the pettiest, most desperate move she could have made, and it proved she was spiraling. I knew what I had to do. I printed every single piece of documentation I had. Photos of Karen trespassing, time-stamped videos of her entering my home screenshots, of her text messages to neighbors. Someone had forwarded them to me. She'd been bragging about finally putting the officer in his place. My own formal incident reports, and a copy of the HOA's own bylaws, which, shocker, say nothing about entering someone's home or backyard without permission. Then I made a call to my department. I told them I needed to escalate the trespass case into a full criminal complaint. They agreed. I scheduled a meeting with the HOA board and told them I would be arriving with evidence, backup from the department, and legal representation if needed. It was time to go on offense. I didn't care about Karen's screaming fits or fake victim act. She broke into a cop's house, and now she was going to deal with the real-world consequences. And oh, it gets better. Because when I showed up at the HOA community center for that board meeting, I wasn't alone. I had two fellow officers with me, off-duty but in uniform, along with the department's legal advisor and a printed folder labeled Evidence Against Karen, Residential Crimes. We walked in together. The board's jaws hit the floor. Karen was already there, dressed like she was going to court, arms crossed, trying to look important. Her confidence lasted exactly 3 minutes, because as soon as I handed over the footage of her inside my house, opening drawers and flipping through my mail, her face turned ghost white. The board members didn't say a word. They just passed the folder down the line, flipping through photos of her reaching over my locked gate, tampering with the backyard light, and walking around my living room like she owned the place. I didn't even need to say much. Karen tried to interrupt, of course. "This is taken out of context. These photos don't prove intent." One of the board members, Mr. Collins, a quiet, older guy who'd always kept his distance from Karen, looked up and said, "Karen, this isn't a courtroom. And even if it were, you'd be cooked," she gasped. I leaned forward. "You came after me because I wouldn't roll over like everyone else. You thought a clipboard made you untouchable. But you forgot the one thing. About power, Karen," she scowled. "What?" I smiled. It only works when people are afraid to push back. Karen didn't show her face for 2 weeks after the meeting. No smug strolls past my property. No passive-aggressive notes taped to mailboxes. No 6 a.m. lawn inspections. It was like the entire neighborhood could finally breathe. And I won't lie. Those 2 weeks were glorious. Neighbors I barely knew came up to me while I walked Titan. They'd say things like, "About time someone stood up to her," or, "Did she really break into your house?" Or my personal favorite, "Man, if she tried that with me, I'd have lost it. Glad you handled it professionally." Word spread fast. People who had stayed quiet for years were suddenly feeling bold. Turns out, I wasn't the only one Karen had harassed, just the only one who fought back with more than a complaint and a grumble. I didn't press charges right away, not because I couldn't. Believe me, every officer in the precinct was rooting for me to do it. But I wanted to see how the HOA handled things first, if they had any backbone left. And surprisingly, they did. A week after the board meeting, I got a certified letter. Karen had been voted off the board. Unanimous decision. Immediate removal. Permanently banned from holding any leadership position within the HOA ever again. I read the letter 3 times, just to make sure I wasn't dreaming. It got even better. The board added a formal apology on the last page, addressed to me by name. It read, We regret that one of our own acted so recklessly, and we thank you for your professionalism, restraint, and service to our community. The board is currently seeking new leadership and would welcome your involvement. At first, I laughed. Me, on the HOA board? I had spent the last 6 months avoiding anything to do with them. I'd watched them fine people for having garden gnomes and host meetings that felt more like courtroom dramas than neighborhood gatherings. But then I thought about it. Maybe the problem wasn't the HOA itself. Maybe it was the Karens of the world who weaponized authority to control everyone else. If someone like me was on the board, someone who actually believed in protecting rights instead of stomping on them, maybe things could change. So I showed up to the next open board meeting. The room was packed, standing room only. Everyone was talking about what happened like it was some urban legend. I took a seat near the back, not saying anything, just listening. When they opened nominations for a new board member, at least 5 people raised their hands and said my name. I didn't even have to speak. They wanted me, so I accepted. The vote was taken right there on the spot. 26 out of 27 households in favor. The 27th was Karen's. She abstained. Big shocker. Just like that, I was on the board, and let me tell you, the vibe changed instantly. First order of business, I motioned to rewrite the nuisance and inspection policy to require written notice and a resident's consent before any on-property visit is made. That passed with no objections. Second, I proposed we eliminate fines for cosmetic violations like garden flags, holiday lights, or mismatched patio chairs. If it wasn't affecting safety or property values, it wasn't our business. That passed too. But the third motion was the one that really sealed the deal. I called it the Karen Clause. It stated, any board member or representative found entering a resident's property or home without written consent and legal justification will be immediately terminated from their role and reported to law enforcement. The room clapped, like full-on applause. Karen wasn't at that meeting. Rumor was she'd put her house up for sale the week after her removal. Couldn't handle the loss of control. Couldn't walk the streets without feeling the burn of every neighbor's stare. I won't say I felt sorry for her, because I didn't. Actions have consequences. She thought she could rule through fear and paperwork. She learned the hard way what happens when you mess with the wrong person. A few days later, as I was walking Titan past her house, I noticed the for sale sign had a big red sticker slapped across it. Under contract. She was leaving. Gone. Just like that. I stood there for a moment, watching a moving truck back into her driveway. Boxes were stacked near the garage. One of them had clipboards written in Sharpie across the side. Couldn't help but laugh. A teenage girl, maybe her daughter or niece, was helping load the truck. She looked up, saw me, and gave a shy wave. I nodded back. No drama, no screaming, just closure. Titan and I kept walking. A few houses down, Mr. Collins was raking leaves. He looked up and gave me a thumbs up. Neighborhood feels better already, he said. I nodded. One less clipboard to worry about. He laughed. You think you're ready for all the politics that come with being on the board? I shrugged. After dealing with Karen, everything else feels easy. I never planned to get involved in HOA politics. I didn't move into this neighborhood to police people's lawn heights or argue about mailbox colors. I just wanted peace and a safe place to call home. But sometimes life throws you into the fire for a reason. Not to burn you, but to remind you. You can handle the heat. And now, the neighborhood is quieter. People are friendlier. The HOA actually works for the residents, not against them. And Titan still gets the occasional extra treat from neighbors who call him the hero dog who barked Karen into exile. As for me, I still keep my badge in the same place. But these days, I don't have to pull it out very often. Turns out, respect goes a long way when people know you're not afraid to stand your ground. And if anyone ever thinks about stepping onto my property again without permission, well, let's just say the new HOA rules are very clear.